Before he was a face on the dollar, before he was a general, before the name echoed through marble halls and textbooks, he was just a boy, born into a raw, untamed land, not of nobility, not of myth, but of flesh, fear, and fire. A surveyor's son who walked the forests alone. A young soldier who saw blood before he saw glory. He never dreamed of being king. He never longed for the spotlight. But destiny, it has a way of finding quiet men. This is the true story of the man America turned to, again and again. Not because he wanted power, but because he couldn't bear to watch freedom die. He gave up more than he ever took, and in doing so, he gave birth to a republic. His name was George Washington. And this is the story of the reluctant hero who built a nation. George Washington was born on February 22, 1732, in Westmoreland County, Virginia. Not into riches, not into fame, but into uncertainty. His father, Augustine, was a planter and land speculator. His mother, Mary Ball Washington, was strong-willed and strict, a force that shaped his young mind. George was the eldest of 6 children from Mary, but his father had children from a previous marriage. When George was just 11, his father died. That meant no elite education in England like his half-brothers. No polished upbringing, just the hard soil of Virginia, and a relentless desire to prove himself. As a teenager, Washington learned land surveying, mapping forests, measuring rivers, sleeping under stars. He became obsessed with discipline, with reputation, with honor. He copied entire etiquette books by hand. He wasn't a genius. He was obsessed with self-mastery. At just 21 years old, George Washington was commissioned as a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia. A young man of towering height, sharp resolve, and limited experience. But fate had no intention of waiting. In the spring of 1754, he led an ambush deep in the woods near what is now Pittsburgh, an attack that ignited the first shots of the French and Indian War, and by extension, the global conflict we now call the 7 Years' War. It was a bold strike, but one that brought fire upon him. The French retaliated. Their native allies struck with swiftness and fury. At a muddy, makeshift outpost called Fort Necessity, Washington's men were surrounded. Under torrential rain, with supplies low and casualties mounting, he signed terms of surrender. His only one. To the British elite, it was a stain. To Washington, it was a lesson, a bitter one. He learned how to lead, how to bleed, how to lose with dignity, and fight again with resolve. It was here he first tasted command, and the loneliness that came with it. He saw firsthand the flaws of British military arrogance, how they mocked colonial officers, denied them ranks, used them, then dismissed them. In their polished boots and powdered wigs, he saw not strength, but contempt. And slowly, a seed was planted, a quiet fire. Not yet for revolution, but for independence of spirit. He began to look less toward London and more toward the land beneath his feet, the soil of Virginia, the will of its people. By the war's end, he was no longer a boy. After the war, Washington returned to Mount Vernon, his estate along the Potomac. He married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children. He planted crops, raised stepchildren, and tried to live a peaceful life, but peace didn't last. By the 1760s, British taxes were choking the colonies. Stamp Act, Sugar Act, Tea Act. Washington, a loyal British subject no more, I can foresee nothing but the most fatal consequences to the whole empire. He didn't want war, but he hated tyranny more. In 1775, as rebellion erupted, the Continental Congress met in Philadelphia. They needed a leader, someone respected by all 13 colonies, someone with humility and steel. John Adams nominated George Washington. He didn't ask for it. He didn't even want it. But once chosen, he stood tall and accepted. At 43, Washington became commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. But the army? It was a ragtag band of farmers and blacksmiths, ill-fed, ill-equipped, outgunned, and they were facing the most powerful empire on earth. Washington wrote, "We must resolve to conquer or die." The revolution was not glorious, it was brutal. Washington lost more battles than he won. New York, Long Island, Brooklyn Heights. But he never surrendered. Then came Christmas night, 1776. Trenton, freezing rain, Delaware River, surprise attack, victory. It changed everything. From Valley Forge to Yorktown, Washington held the army together, not with money or food, but with faith. They called him His Excellency, but he slept in tents beside his men. He bled with them, prayed with them, starved with them. And in 1781, with help from the French, he defeated the British at Yorktown. After the war, Washington could have been king. Seriously. But in 1783, he shocked the world. He gave up power, resigned, returned home. The world had never seen it before. A victorious general, choosing to be a farmer. King George III reportedly said, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." But history wasn't done with him. In 1787, the nation was crumbling under weak laws. Washington presided over the Constitutional Convention. He said little, but when he spoke, they listened. In 1789, he was elected the first president of the United States. Unanimously. He shaped the office with care. 2 terms, no royalty, civilian leadership. and in keeping with the medical beliefs of the time, they bled him. Not once, not twice, but 5 times. They drained nearly 40% of his blood. He struggled to breathe. His final words? "'Tis well. I die hard, but I am not afraid to go." On December 14, 1799, George Washington, the man who had led a revolution, built a government, and walked away from power, was gone. He was 67 years old. America mourned. If you were moved by this untold journey, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories that history tried to forget, but we remember. Only on Untold Lives USA.